Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here with you again for the second day. I've had a wonderful visit in Porto Alegre. We had a very nice dinner last night at the steakhouse. The quantity of food that I ate last night was about what I eat in a normal week. And I don't understand why Brazilians are so skinny, so thin, when the amount of food is so large, but maybe it's a lot of exercise and a lot of walking. My topic for today is the economics of networks and digital technology. This is a fun subject for me to talk about, and it's probably fun for a lot of you to listen to, because we're all interested in network things and digital things, our toys and gadgets, of course. I'm looking at my notes here. This is my notes for the lecture, and we all marvel at these new technologies. We use the internet in so many ways every day. We're hardly even aware of it. Our cellular, our mobile phones and so on. Most of you are on Facebook and MySpace and other social networks, chatting with your friends and so on. We take these phenomena, on the one hand, we often take these phenomena for granted. We don't think about them and analyze them very carefully. We don't apply economic analysis to understanding their nature, their origins, implications for business, for entrepreneurs, for government policy, and so on. Yet, on the other hand, sometimes when commentators, economists, and policy scholars try to think about networks, try to analyze networks and the digital economy, they come to the wrong conclusions. Namely, that a networked economy, a digital economy, is so different from, something else, an old economy, that new rules and new theories and new policies need to be applied. Often claiming, for example, that the government must play a much larger role in regulating, in monitoring, making sure that networks are neutral, making sure that competition is fair, because otherwise the market will fail and the market will not work correctly. And so what I want to do today is to take something of a balanced view and to explain the ways in which, talk about ways in which networks and digital technology make our lives better, make entrepreneurs able to do things they couldn't do before, to explain the role of entrepreneurship in the digital economy, while at the same time puncturing or deflating some myths that are very common in the literature about how digital markets fail, how the market fails in the face of network externalities and first mover advantages and increasing returns and so on. I know that networks and network issues are particularly relevant for you guys in Brazil. When we were at the restaurant the other night, I noticed the telephone pole on the street across from the restaurant, and that's a pretty impressive network. We don't have networks that have that many nodes and that many wires at my home, but I found that pretty impressive. There is a lot of excitement about the new economy, the networked economy, the digital economy in many, many walks of life. What sorts of things do people have in mind? Well, just observing the ways in which people are networked, connected today, and comparing that to things of the past is, of course, extremely important and gets a lot of attention. The internet being the most obvious example, the ways that we are all connected, 24 hours a day by our mobile devices and so on. You can reach almost anyone in the world at almost any time. Some people even enjoy the rare moments when they can be on an airplane, perhaps, and the office can't call, and give you an assignment or something. And of course that is already changing on many flights and will probably soon change on all flights. I don't know, in Brazil, maybe you can go into the rainforest, maybe you can go deep into the heart of the Amazon and you don't have any signal on your wireless device. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are internet hotspots all over the Amazon. But you know, this is something that, if you just think about it, it's a very different way than people have lived in the past. In fact, economists looking at economic development and economic history and the rise of capitalism have often focused on aspects of networks. The economic historian Avner Greif at Stanford University, for example, has argued that it was no coincidence that long-distance trade emerged in the late Middle Ages in the Mediterranean among particular groups of individuals. He's argued, for example, that there was a specific group of Jewish merchants located around the Mediterranean Sea who were among the first to develop reliable mechanisms for long-distance trade. You know, putting your goods on a ship and sending it off to a faraway port where it may not arrive for several months, and then waiting for payment in specie or other goods received in exchange to return to you many months after that. So there's obviously a high degree of trust that would be required for any merchant to send things a long distance, not knowing whether he'll ever get paid. As you think about our discussion yesterday of entrepreneurship, there's a lot of uncertainty here. And you think no sane person would do that, would exchange anonymously with unknown trading partners at a great distance. But as Greif points out, those who developed these trading mechanisms were not doing it anonymously. They were trading with other people who were within their ethnic, cultural, and religious subgroup. They kept very accurate records of the identities of different traders, their trading behavior in the past. There were strong incentives to develop favorable reputations for honesty and reliability. How many of you have bought or sold something on eBay, or the Brazilian equivalent of eBay, where you trade on an auction site? The reason that eBay works, of course, is because after you trade, you have an opportunity to rate the seller. So if you send some money through PayPal or whatever, and the seller sends you the merchandise and it's no good, it's not what was advertised, or it's poor quality, or maybe they never send you the merchandise, you can type nasty messages in the seller ratings, you can smash them in the seller ratings, and then presumably that will make it harder for them to sell goods to other consumers in the future. So there's a strong reputation mechanism that allows anonymous trade at a distance to take place. Well, hundreds of years ago, before there was something like eBay, there were small, close-knit communities that were geographically distant, yet ethnically and culturally close, and were able to maintain records, archives of people's activities, like the seller ratings in eBay. My point is that modern economic historians have demonstrated that it was the network effect of trade that allowed for the beginnings of the commercial revolution, and then, of course, later the industrial revolution, and so on. So what was very rare and difficult and challenging for our ancestors, in this sense, is very easy for us today. Many commentators have remarked on the role of knowledge, or more generally, intangible resources, as the source of profitability or competitive advantage. So it is said, for instance, in the old economy, the way for a company to be successful was to have lots of physical, tangible resources: land, factories, machines, raw materials. And of course, those are still important today, but you have companies like Google and Facebook, Twitter, and so on, that don't have a lot of physical infrastructure, or at least the physical infrastructure that they have, lots of computers, or what they call server farms, right, are not unique. Anybody can have those. What these companies have is knowledge, information, reputation in the marketplace. In other words, the resources that generate the biggest kinds of competitive advantage, it is said, nowadays are much more likely to be intangible resources. And this, it is said, is sort of marks a fundamental difference between the new economy and the old. I'm sure you've all heard of Moore's Law. Do you know Moore's Law? This is named after Gordon Moore, the semiconductor specialist, not Michael Moore, the documentary filmmaker who makes a lot of silly movies. Moore was the engineer, founder of Intel semiconductors, who observed that as a rough approximation, not a praxeological law, the computing power of microprocessor chips doubles approximately every year and a half. So approximately every 18 months, the computing power on a processor chip increases by a factor of 2. And this is, of course, remarkable. This is, exponential growth of computing capacity. One of those graphs where you see a line that is not just increasing, but increasing at an increasing rate, exponential growth. And when you study the new economy or the digital economy and you look at the data, you often see many, many pictures that have these exponential growth, the amount of data that you can store on a little tiny micro memory chip of a certain size. And it's not just increasing by 1 gigabyte per year, it's doubling or something like that every year. And we all have this experience, right? Sometimes it's funny that when we think about how much storage capacity we need on our PC or our iPod or our mobile phone, sort of like the number stays the same, but the unit of measure changes. So when I was a young person, much before many of you in the room were born, a really good computer had 64K of memory, right? And then a few years later, a good computer would have 64 megabytes of memory, and now 64 gigabytes, and tomorrow it'll be 64 terabytes or something like that. So it doesn't really matter what the measurement is. You just know that 16 is not enough, and 32 is a pretty good number. 64 is really good. Sometimes you see these graphs with the line going down, right? The cost of a certain amount of computing power, the economic cost, is falling at an increasing rate. The cost of transmitting information from one place to another, falling at an increasing rate. What's called Metcalfes Law, named after another industrial engineer, is the idea that the value of a network, the benefit from being part of a network, is roughly proportional not to the number of nodes, the number of people on the network, but to the square of the number of nodes.